Geena Davis.
Yeah.
Welcome to Q. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit about you, and then I want to talk a little bit about the film, but they're all kind of related. So, I mean, right off the bat, the documentary starts by looking at some of the earliest images children see on screen. And I'm wondering about your own. Do you remember being aware of sexism on screen when you were growing up?
No. I think I was profoundly not aware of it. And in fact, my best friend and I grew up in a house where the TV goes on the first thing in the morning. It stays on all day.
Right.
And I think a lot of people were like that. But my best friend and I, after school, would pretend to be characters from The Rifleman, which shows how old I am.
The Rifleman?
The Rifleman was a TV show about a widower and his son. And because I was taller, I would be the father, and my friend would be my son. Right. And it never occurred to us that that was strange, or that, why are there not female characters that we want to pretend to be? But of course, it occurs to me now that there weren't any female characters that we wanted to play.
And then there's a turning point of the doc when your daughter is born, right?
Yes. You're right. So she kind of took me down a whole new path as far as my interest in gender representation on screen. I've been very interested in it from a selfish perspective, in as much as I'm an actor and always looking for good parts. But it was when I sat down with her to start having her watch preschool shows and little kids' videos and things like that, that I was thunderstruck to see how few female characters there seemed to be in entertainments aimed at little kids in the 21st century. Mm-hmm. And it really was a stunning realization that we would be more or less training kids to have unconscious gender bias from the very beginning by saying, clearly, girls and women are not as important as men and boys because we're not showing them. And when we do, they're sexualized or narrowly stereotyped, or not really doing the interesting and important things.
Unconscious is a word that comes up a lot in this documentary, and it comes up when you go to speak to some Hollywood executives. Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, I know you sit down and start talking to them about it, and a lot of them don't even know.
Right.
Don't even know that there's a problem.
Right.
Or they think they're on the good team.
Exactly. Well, that's what I found. I didn't intend to, launch a whole new phase of my life over this issue, but at first I just mentioned it whenever I had a meeting with a director, a producer, studio executive. I'd say, have you ever noticed how few female characters there are in movies made for kids? And just as you said, every single person said, oh no, but that's not true anymore. That's been fixed. And we fixed it. And they would name a movie very often with one or maybe two female characters as proof that gender inequality had been fixed. So it was astounding to me how unconscious it was.
What does that tell you?
That they were raised on the same ratio as kids are being today, and they have unconscious bias. I think what I concluded is that if there's a movie that has maybe even a lead female character who's maybe smart, maybe capable, has some skills, whatever, that you've covered women, that one is enough as long as it's significant, and that the population doesn't matter, and that they just can't see that women were missing in such tremendous numbers. But that's why I decided I wanted the data, which has proved to be the magic key to all of this. Once they see the data, they realize what they were doing.
Well, and once you saw the data as well, I mean, so you end up starting this institute to look at these issues in 2004. Very different than an institution. Correct. But you, when you get these hard numbers,
right?
Was there anything that surprised you too?
Yeah, well, I mean, I knew what I thought I saw, but it was surprising to see it in black and white like that, and the level of hypersexualization I think was really startling. One thing we found was that in G-rated animated movies, the female characters wear the same amount of sexually revealing clothing as the female characters in R-rated movies.
Toy Story. That's the one I couldn't
Well,
get
Toy
over.
Story that's not G, that's PG.
Oh, is that PG?
Yes.
I think I was struck in the film that when I saw this Toy Story leg with the crane on top of it.
Oh, right, that's in the movie.
Yeah.
Right.
I had never thought of it, but because I watched that when I was a child as well.
You know what? I had never thought of it when I saw the movie. And
Yeah.
then when you see it separated out like that, you're like, oh, that's weird.
Were there movies or TV shows though that made you think that a change was possible? That made you that seemed to be going against the current?
Well, Teletubbies are gender balanced. I don't know if you can tell. But they are. So I'm very hopeful and optimistic. Do you mean?
I mean, Sandra Oh in the film talks about the Joy Luck Club being a real turning point,
Right.
turning point film for her. I was wondering if there were any like that for you.
Right. Well, you know, they come along, you know, actually fairly frequently, films that are feature women prominently and are very inspiring. I get to even be in a couple, but the problem has been that they don't create momentum. You know, that we don't see. All right, well now, this changes everything, and now we realize that there is a tremendous appetite for movies starring women, about women, told from a female perspective, and Wonder Woman is a fantastic example. You know, by any measure, that should put to rest once and for all the idea that that people, you know, mass audiences don't want to see women in lead roles. And in fact, our research shows that that for the past several years, movies starring a female character make significantly more money at the box office than movies starring male characters. So that's pretty telling.
That idea of a turning point and a game changer comes up a lot in the film, and it's something that I'm really interested in talking to you about. And you mentioned just then, Geena, that there's, you said, I was lucky enough to star in one of them. So we have headphones right there. Would you mind just putting those on? I'm going to put mine on too. I know. Is that working for you?
Yeah.
All right, stick them on.
Okay.
And so I want you to take a listen to this.
Yeah, we think you have really bad manners.
Yeah, where did you get off behaving like that with women you didn't even know? Huh? Huh? How'd you feel if somebody did that to your mother? Or your sister? Or your wife?
Huh? What are you talking about?
You know good and damn well what I'm talking about.
I mean, really, that business with your tongue? What is that? That is disgusting.
So that's from 1991. That's in Thelma and Louise. I didn't want to ruin it for you before we introduced it. What goes through your mind when you hear that?
We had heavy accents. What is that? You know, nothing but good memories about it. You know, it was the best script I'd ever read. I was astounded to actually be able to be in it, and it you know, really impacted my life more than any other film.
Did it feel like one of those turning points?
Well, you know, so none of us expected the reaction that it got when it came out. It was amazing, you know, the kinds of positive and negative reactions that it engendered, and one thing that was very striking was how the press seemed to say, this movie, obviously now everything has changed. We're going to see so many more movies starring women, female buddy pictures, female road pictures. This is really the start of something new, and they put us on the cover of Time magazine like 2 weeks after it came out, and it was amazing. We didn't expect that at all, and so that was a wonderful aspect of it. And I have to admit, I thought, that sounds plausible. That sounds like that could happen. And it was, you know, been waiting ever since for it.
Well, and I'm trying my best, just in general in life, Geena, not to be cynical.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to ask you about this. We're also seeing that turning point conversation right now. You mentioned Wonder Woman.
Right.
Crazy Rich Asians.
Right.
Black Panther.
Black Panther.
Each of these films come out and we see the same thing. This is a turning point for representation in cinema.
Right.
This is a turning point for Asian American representation in cinema, for female representation in cinema. Does it make you cynical at all, or does this feel different?
Well, yes, I've become very cynical about that. because, my attention was drawn to it so starkly, and then I saw that didn't really seem to pan out. And then, maybe 5 or 7 years later, there's another movie that people say, oh, this changes everything. And I'm like, okay, well, let's see. And it didn't happen any of those times. And, by the time it got to Hunger Games, and people said, well, now everything will change because it's a teenage star, female star, and
again, a huge
success, right. And now really things will change, and I became pretty cynical about it. I'm like, let's see the numbers. Let's see the numbers. Let's see this actually happen. You can't just keep saying this is happening or it has happened, and a sort of lifetime of doing interviews where every interviewer would say, so do you think things have changed now? Things have changed, right? Yeah. And I feel like, at first I was like, I think so, seems like it, but ultimately I was like, look it up, Google it, get the numbers. It doesn't matter what anybody's opinion is. Does it actually change is what counts.
Well, I'm going to be one of those interviewers. I mean, when I look at the rally you had in Toronto yesterday, right. that you were part of putting off. I look at Ronan Farrow's reporting on the women who came out with allegations against Harvey Weinstein in this Me Too movement we live in right now.
Right.
It's hard to, I mean, again, but I wasn't around some of those early days. This is perhaps the first turning point that I'm quote unquote living through, or quote unquote turning point that I'm living through. Does it feel different at all in 2018?
Yes. I think so. It does. And speaking as somebody who became cynical about all these proclamations, I think it is different now. I mean, I'm a part of it. I was a founding member of Time's Up, and I think we have reached a tipping point. And I think the film highlights that when we see all the rallies that took place, and there is a different feeling now. And part of it is also evidenced in the film by how many women wanted to be a part of it and to speak out and to tell their truth. And that's different, I think for the longest time, many of us had the feeling that it's not okay to talk about these kind of things. You don't want to be seen as being trouble or having any problems with your career or stirring the pot or anything like that. And that your job was to be very acceptable and very, everybody has to like me. I have to, have this reputation of somebody who absolutely never complains, and so much got buried, I think, and now it's suddenly completely different. A year later, it's completely different. It is not only okay to talk about what you think, but it's okay to instantly talk about it. And the second someone finds out I'm not being paid as much as my co-star, it hits the news, and there's no hesitation anymore, which is very different.
I don't want to use the word boring, and so I won't, but when we talk about data and when we talk about numbers, these things aren't necessarily very sexy, but they're very, very impactful. They're very, very useful.
Right.
I think that also came when we saw Frances McDormand at the Academy Awards this year get up, and she spoke about a concrete thing. Here's something we can do tomorrow.
Exactly.
Inclusion rider. We can all put this on our contract tomorrow, and things can change.
Right.
I'm wondering, in the making of this film, and just through your lifetime of advocacy, give me an example of another concrete thing perhaps we could be doing.
I think this concept of the inclusion rider is very exciting, and only just a couple of days ago, Warner's announced that they were adopting a studio-wide inclusion rider, which is
That's great.
Fabulous. Yeah. And I think we've seen examples of film festivals as well jumping on board, and TIFF has announced its commitment to 50-50 by 2020, and they sponsored a rally. It wasn't a rally against, what was happening. It was a rally that was part of what's happening, and endorsed by the festival. So I think there's some very positive signs. I think that's another change that we can actually see happening, is that the powers that be are much more embracing what's going on. You know, Rotten Tomatoes had it pointed out how few female and people of color they had as their reviewers, and they have, you know, created a whole new policy and are really very proactively addressing this, which is fantastic, you know. And TIFF has also added, I think, 200 more accreditations for reporters.
Trying to diversify the critic pool in Toronto, which is much needed. Why is now the right time for this film, for this documentary?
Well, for the documentary? Well, it's interesting that our director, Tom Donahue, started making it years before any of this happened, before, you know, the Time's Up and Me Too. And I think it's always the right time to look at these issues. It's been going on, you know, this systemic sexism in our industry has been going on for many, many decades, and no progress being made. So, you know, it's critical to point it out. But the film happens to arrive at a moment when there really is change happening, and I think it's going to help galvanize that.
Who do you hope watches it?
Everybody in the industry and everybody else. But I think I wish that everybody in the industry would watch this, because even when you're incredibly immersed in things the way I am, not just as a member of the industry, but somebody who's been working in this aspect for a while, there's so much I learned, and so many powerful messages in there that I think it's important for us to see.
I want to close like this. I want to go back to that word we've been talking about a lot, which is the word unconscious. And I think that's something that comes up a lot of this film, which is like the stories, we just think we're watching films, we think we're watching TV shows, but little do we know, unconsciously, there are things going on there.
Right.
We had this conversation with Amber Tamblyn a couple of weeks ago in the show, and I wanted to get your perspective on it. You know, what impact can fictional stories, these fictional stories have on our society?
I think fictional stories have a tremendous, profound impact on us. That seeing ourselves reflected in the popular culture gives us the clues about our value. You know, if you see somebody that looks like you, doing interesting things, being treated as somebody important, you know, you get a very strong message. So this is the whole reason I got involved in What Kids See First. If you're not there, or if you're being treated as an object or eye candy, or and you don't see someone like you doing interesting and important things, obviously it applies to gender as well as any other type of differentness, otherness, you're getting a very strong message that you're not valuable, you're not an equal contributor to society. And boys, obviously, white boys are getting the message too, that they are more important. You know, girls' self-esteem from watching TV goes down, and boys' goes up.
Is it so?
So yes, so clearly there's a really negative message that's impacting us profoundly. But as powerful as images can be in a negative sense, they can be tremendously powerful in a positive sense. If you see someone, you know, that's why my motto is, if they see it, they can be it, or if she sees it, she can be it. If you see someone who looks like you do something fabulous, you say, wait a minute, that means I could do that? That's fantastic. And it literally happens. Like when in the same summer, Brave and Hunger Games came out. This is just a small example, both with female archers as the protagonists. Girls' participation in archery skyrocketed, shot up 105% instantly.
And CSI too, right? That was in your film.
CSI is in the film. There's something called the CSI effect,
right?
Because there were so many female forensic scientists on TV that women now dominate that field, and it's because they saw somebody on TV doing it, and they said, "Oh, I can do it." You know, we don't have enough real life role models that we can emulate. So we need them in fiction. I'll tell you just a funny thing about, I met the former president of Iceland one time, and she was president for like 16 years, Vigdis Finnbogadóttir, and she told me that she used to get letters from little boys saying, Madam President, do you think it will ever be possible for a boy to be president? Because they had a real life role model, and that's what they saw, and they assume, that's the way it is. So it's tremendously powerful and influential what we show on screen.
Geena Davis, what a pleasure it is to talk to you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks so much for coming in.